Antoinette Parks grew up as one of the youngest of the 6 siblings with a promising future ahead of her. She was known to be one of the most ambitious of the family, always thriving for bigger and greater things. Unfortunately, her fate was met with sinister on January 24th, 1981. Because of this unfortunate event, she is now remembered as the 17-year-old teen who was found stabbed to death in the area of 64th Avenue and Broadway in Adams County, which is located several miles north of downtown Denver. Ms. Parks was 6 to 7 months pregnant at the time, and no one was arrested for her murder. Hi guys, my name is Teddy, and this is Teddy's Artistry.
Teddy's Artistry presents
Welcome to my channel. I'm glad you found me. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope you give me a chance to give you a reason to stick around. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for tuning in. I love you for continuously supporting me more than you will ever know. So today we're going to be talking about the story of Antoinette Parks. I don't know if you guys heard about this story, but the first time I heard about this story was back in 2016, and it was still an unsolved crime at the time. Before we get started, I'd like to give you a quick disclaimer.
This video is for educational purposes only. I mean absolutely no disrespect to any and all the victims I will be talking about today. This video is intended for mature audiences only.
Antoinette Parks was born on April 15th, 1963. She grew up in Colorado. She was the youngest of 6 siblings and attended Gateway High School in Aurora, Colorado. George Jr. was one of the brothers that really spoke out about her, stating that Antoinette was a very good student, always had A's and B's in school, loved kids, and had a heart of gold. Antoinette was also known to have had a beautiful voice, a very talented vocalist who was a member of the music club and sang at her school's choir. Overall, it looked like she grew up in a very loving family, had a pretty normal childhood, great friends, nothing out of the ordinary. But early in her senior year, in 1980, she does get pregnant by her boyfriend at the time, who was several years older than her. Now, assume this has to come up because the boyfriend is probably older than her, as in he's no longer in high school with her. So when she gets pregnant, she decides to drop out of school to prepare to become a mother. And so this is when she decided to go get a job at Denny's as a waitress, and she announced to her boyfriend the great news. However, the boyfriend did not find it as a great news. In fact, he was very upset about the news. Not only was he not happy about the news, but he did not want Antoinette to have the baby. He starts convincing her to get an abortion. When she refused, this ticked him off, and so he starts being a little more crazy. Like, he starts yelling at her. He goes from nice, loving boyfriend to all of a sudden this crazy guy who was yelling at her, cussing at her, calling her names, being crazy, accusing her of wanting to take all of his money, just acting all kind of way. So when the afternoon of January of 1981 comes around, garbage collector were just going about their day, doing their normal route, picking up trash can. When they come to this specific area, they thought they saw a mannequin laying next to the trash. But then later they realized this was not a mannequin, but in fact, it was someone's body. They called it in immediately. Investigators came out there, and when investigator came, this is when we learned that that woman's body was Antoinette's body. Antoinette has been stabbed 23 times. There was tumbleweed on her hair. There was scratches and cut all over her face. There were cuts, wound on her hands, on her chest, a gash of wound on her head, multiple stab wounds everywhere. It was a very gruesome scene. Now, the police say that because of the tumbleweed in her hair and the scratches on her face, it does show that it was an indication that she was killed elsewhere and then she was dragged there. Nevertheless, this was confirmed to be Antoinette. Unfortunately, she was pronounced deceased at the scene. Now, when police go to talk to friends and family, nobody really had anything bad to say about Antoinette, nor would have any kind of enemies. Nobody could think of anybody who would want to harm her. Everybody loved Antoinette, and it was just so it was so shocking not just to the family, but to everybody. Now, when police go to talk to the boyfriend, of course, he was the prime suspect. He claimed that Antoinette did go to his house that afternoon. They got into an argument, and the argument got heated. I don't know about what, but Antoinette got upset and stormed off on foot angrily, denying anything to do with her murder. Now, when this happens, obviously there's no strong evidence to arrest the boyfriend or put him in custody, and so without any evidence to hold him, police couldn't arrest him. George just didn't believe the boyfriend, and so he went and confronted the boyfriend, saying that his sister was pregnant. He doubted that she would walk anywhere, let alone the distance she would have had to walk to get home. But the boyfriend is completely denying anything to do with her murder. He says he didn't do anything with her. He does admit that they did get an argument, but that was it. And so because police don't have no witness at the crime scene, not enough evidence to hold anybody in custody, this case is just kind of lingering there. Meanwhile, the family are now forced to prepare to bury their loved ones. And so the sister Virginia said that she volunteered to put her sister together for the funeral because she knew that her sister always liked to look nice. Her sister was always dressed up, and so she wanted to honor her sister and put her together before they had to say goodbye. At this point, police have very little leads to go on, as there was absolutely no eyewitness, and there wasn't a lot of evidence left at the scene. They were able to collect some DNA, but remind you, back in the 1980s and 90s, DNA technology was not that advanced. Therefore, there wasn't really much the investigators could do at the time. And so at this point, the family are forced to put their sister at rest without really knowing who took her life. So weeks go by, then weeks turn into months, then months turn into years, then years turn into decades. This case goes cold for over 40 years before advances in DNA technology shed new light onto the case. Between 2013 and 2018, through DNA evidence, 3 more women who were stabbed to death between the year of 1978 and 1981 were now tied to the case. Police said 33-year-old Madeline Foray Lavedeas, I'm pretty sure I'm butchering her name, I apologize, was a wife, a mother of 2, who was killed at her Denver home in 1978. Literally the place she felt the most safe. Dolores Baraja, who was 53 at the time, was killed while walking to work on August of 1980. Again, why? In December of 1980, Gwendolyn Harris was a 27-year-old who was found stabbed to death on the street corner about a block from the suspect's residence at the time. So when 2019 comes along, Texas received a positive ancestry link. Texas had the suspect's DNA because of a murder case of 1960. The killer's criminal history dated back to when a Tarrant County grand jury convicted him for the August 8, 1969 Rodney Jean Bonham murder, who was 21-year-old at the time living in Fort Worth, Texas. The suspect was only 17 years old at the time. What? It seems like he was a very troubled soul already in the very beginning, because when the suspect got convicted for the murder, he decided to change his name and flee to Colorado. This was also the main reason the killings had initially been investigated separately, but also because his birth year was entered incorrectly in the National Crime Information Computer. 2 years later, in 2001, authorities in Texas, while doing a record search for a biological relative of the killer's DNA profile, they got a match of someone who was close to the then unidentified suspect. The relative was able to finally identify the killer as Joe Michael Ervin, who took his own life 41 years ago after being arrested for the fatal shooting of an Aurora police officer. This part kind of ticks me off a little bit. Now, what happened back in June of 1981? Now, remember, January of 1981, he kills Antoinette Parks. 6 months later, in June of 1981, Ervin was pulled over at a traffic stop by an Aurora police officer by the name of Deborah Sue Core. There was a struggle, and he somehow gained control of the officer's gun while being handcuffed, shot her with her own gun. A gentleman by the name of Glenn Spies was driving home, witnessed this incident, and decides to intervene, which I gotta tell you, girl, he is more brave than me. I see a gun and I said, I'm out. I'm out. He states, I pulled over behind her car. I got out and tried to assist the officer, at which time I heard her scream for help. I heard a gunfire and tried to duck behind the patrol unit. He shot me and I fell to the ground. Luckily, Glenn Spy survived. Unfortunately, Deborah did not. Ervin then managed to escape and get away. However, a few days later, he does get arrested at his home in Aurora while trying to saw off the handcuff Officer Core had placed on his wrist before he grabbed her gun. When Ervin gets caught, he gets arrested, he gets put in prison. Obviously, he's awaiting trial, right? He's being held in custody because he killed a police officer, but as he was sitting in jail 4 days later, he takes his own life. Ervin killed himself on July 1st, 1981 in the Adams County Detention Center. Now, I don't really think there was ever an explanation as to why he took his own life. I think that he was going through a lot of mental problem and needed some serious mental help. But unfortunately, help didn't come on time, and unfortunately, he ended up taking a lot more lives than he should have. And from that point on, honestly, that's where the story kind of ends. It's like there's no good ending to this story at all. Yeah, so this story is really frustrating. Denver Police Chief Paul Pazan said Friday at a news conference, I hope I'm not butchering his name. He said, while the perpetrator cannot fully be held accountable for his despicable action, we hope that knowing who's responsible can bring some peace to the family. Which, that's all anybody could ask for, is just bringing peace and closure. The brother George had one last thought, saying that I'm angry because he didn't face justice, but I know my mom and family wouldn't want us angry. They'd want us to be happy and that this is all brought to a close. We can finally have peace knowing who did this to my little sister. I'd like you guys all to know we have closure. Which that is just all anybody could ask for, is closure, but it sucks so bad. George said that his mother and 3 other sisters had died since Antoinette had been killed, and they never got to find out who killed Antoinette. Which, to me, honestly, I know the whole family is hurt. It sucks so bad, but for me, I feel the most for the mother. I cannot imagine, like, someone took her child away and she lived her life for decades afterwards and ended up passing away not knowing who took her child away from her. That is honestly the most heartbreaking thing ever. And it's just so sad and unfortunate, but unfortunately, this is the story of Antoinette Parks. I remember watching this story and just thinking like, oh my God, why? Why would someone stab a pregnant woman like that? Didn't even make any sense. And now that we have an answer to the case, the killer definitely was not who I was suspecting. I know y'all here all be suspecting the boyfriend. Trust me, we all was. But the boyfriend actually didn't do it. And unfortunately, the killer who is found is no longer here to serve justice. And so I'm just so happy that the case finally got solved, but I'm just also very devastated at the same time because, yeah, there's no happy ending to this story. That's just it. Honestly, that's all for the story. All right, guys, that's all for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this victim story. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up, subscribe. It's a free way to help me out. While you're at it, don't forget to turn on the bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Please be safe out there. Make someone smile today. Drink your water. And most importantly, schedule time off screen. Until then, see you all on my next video.
Thank you. I'm just messing.